Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. It was the final final week, of League action this weekend, and with that, a sad close, but at least we have a World Cup to look forward to on the horizon. But before we take a look back at an exciting final weekend and also a crazy managerial merry-go-round that is certainly starting to spin, and of course that Les Bleus squad ahead of Russia 2018. Here's the latest headlines. The final league weekend had every single game played at once, so we'll mix it a little bit, starting with Lyon, who qualified for Champions League football after a dramatic 3-2 victory against Nice. A Memphis Depay hat-trick ruled out Alisson Players' double to seal Ligon's passage to automatic Champions League qualification thanks to Marseille's defeat in the Europa League final. Also securing qualification, and they practically done it already, but they confirmed it with a 3-0 victory over Troyes. It is Monaco, who got a double from Ronnie Lopez, one of the stars of the season. That result also sent the home side down to Ligue 2, with Troyes finishing 4 points from safety, with Toulouse finishing slightly above them, who managed to get a 2-1 victory they needed against Guingamp, with Maximilien Gradel and Yaya Sanogo scoring their goals. But it wasn't quite enough, because Caen managed a 0-0 draw against Paris Saint-Germain. Another time, the second year in a row, Caen needed points against PSG, and they claimed something from that game, meaning Toulouse will be in that playoff against the Ligue 2 side, which is still to be definitely confirmed after a crazy playoff that has gone topsy-turvy all week. It was supposed to be played on Saturday between Ajaccio and Le Havre. It was postponed because of issues with attacking the bus. The game actually went underway on Sunday, ended in a 2-2 draw after extra time, where a penalty gave Le Havre a lead, a controversial one at that, just before about 5 minutes to go. It sparked great and shocking scenes, really, with Mateta getting sent off for his celebration, and another Le Havre player also getting a red card, as well as an Ajaccio one, giving them 9 men each. There was interruptions, there was pitch invasions, but Ajaccio eventually won in penalties after scoring in the very, very last minute with an absolute thunderbolt. But that decision is still with the authorities, because that may be reversed ahead of those games starting on Wednesday. Back to the games in Liga, and qualifying for Europe also was confirmed for Bordeaux, who will be in the Europa League along with Rennes and Marseille next season, with a 4-0 victory over Metz, their final game in Liga for the foreseeable future. Talking of Marseille, they got the result they needed at that point, at least anyway, and were for a time with Lyon behind in those Champions League places, but unfortunately miss out for the second time in 4 days. Their 2-1 win against Amiens, not quite enough for them to seal the place in Europeans' premier competition. Elsewhere, Saint-Etienne recorded a fantastic 5-0 win, including a hat-trick for Hamouma in an excellent game that might be the final one for Jean-Louis Gasset, with potential new owners at Les Verts maybe looking towards a new coach themselves. In other dotted results, Dijon won 2-1 to end their home stint with terrific form, and ending as the 5th top scorers in Liga, behind the top 4, which is not bad going at all. Nantes signed off the Claudio Ranieri era with a 1-0 win against Strasbourg, and Rennes drew 1-1 with Montpellier, as they had already confirmed their Europa League place. And that's all for now, but for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week, where else, than Ligue 1 and its final match day that brought out many surprises. And we're going to start near the top of the table, and especially that game in Lyon, Rich, because it was a terrific encounter. If anyone managed to catch any of the action on Saturday evening, it was really the perfect game for them to pick, and an excellent one at that. They made it hard on themselves at times, and Nice gave them a right game with it, especially with a number of their staff looking to move on. Favre linked to Dortmund. There's Alisson Player and Balotelli and Seri might all be heading for the door this summer, but they put up a fight. But at the same time, Lyon just about had enough, and especially Rich, Memphis Depay.
Yeah, I mean, he has been the real star. I think I mentioned when we talked about this race quite a few weeks ago that I felt that it was coming down to sort of Depay versus Payet, with sort of Fekir and Tovan just returning from injuries. And it's proved to be the case. I think that it has been Depay versus Payet, and Depay has won out because as scintillating as form as Payet has been, and rightfully he has been praised for that form. Depay has been every bit as successful over the last month or so. It really is his form that's dragged Lyon. I mean, at one point I thought that they'd perhaps blown it for the top 3 spot, but they've dragged themselves back, and that's primarily due to Depay and the sort of terrific goal scoring form that he's been in. It was a match. I mean, I thought with the early goal to Nice, I thought, is this going to be how Lyon are going to blow it? They're going to blow it at the last after fighting so hard to get back into it, after themselves obviously blowing it themselves with that pretty poor run towards the start of the year. But I just thought, with everything that Nice was riding on with Nice, with obviously Favre going, with Player going, with Balotelli seemingly going, with Seri seemingly going, and a couple of other players rumoured to be off as well, was this sort of the last hurrah for Nice and sort of securing their Europa League spot, and whilst also trumping Lyon's hopes for Champions League qualification. But it's to great credit to Lyon. Lyon fans won't like me saying this, but it's to great credit to Genesio that he's kept with this side. I think the Depay and Traore strike partnership in that 4-4-2 has worked really well. We've certainly seen, without shadow of a doubt, the best from Depay. I think we're starting to see a much more consistent Bertrand Traore as well. Fekir just behind them, and then the sort of fantastic young trio that we've sort of lauded. It's felt like all season now with Toussaint, Aouar, and Ndombele. It's a terrific midfield and forward line. So it's absolutely to Genesio's credit. He's got a lot of stick for quite some time now, and even after the whistle, he got a plenty of stick. Banners going up in the stadium of, I think there were even some anti-Olas banners as well, which I don't know what more could have been asked for from this Lyon side. I think third place is a great result compared to the what's above them. I think they just have to accept that a bit more investment is going to be needed in the squad to take it to that next level. But I think Genesio has done by and large, he's not faultless, don't get me wrong, but by and large he's done a very successful job. So it was a pretty tense game. I think when Player got that 89th minute second goal to make it 3-2, I think there were a lot of Lyon fans who thought, oh God, we've seen things like this before. You hark back to, I think it was a game against Bordeaux earlier in the season where there was 2 very, very late Bordeaux goals to salvage a point for them. So it was a very nervy finish, but they held on. I think third place is probably a fair reflection of where their performances have been this season. It guarantees them Champions League football next season. It guarantees them group stage Champions League football next season as well. And that will do wonders, I think, going into their summer for their recruitment, and whether or not a certain Nabil Fekir is going to depart or not. I think the words from Olas this evening seemed a bit more defiant on Fekir staying than going, with Champions League football secured. So it's a very, very important result for the club, both in terms of who they can bring in, but perhaps more importantly, who they can also then keep as well. So I think it's been, by and large, a good season for Lyon. And I think, as I say, I think third place is a pretty fair reflection of where they are right now.
Absolutely, and they were really, really good. I thought the weekend to come back and Depay was instrumental in that. And I want to give Genesio some credit because I've given him some stick sometimes this season. But I thought, even though we obviously didn't start him, but I think Mariano Diaz can be a sort of very streaky kind of player, especially because he can be so selfish. But to bring him on and bring off Ndombele was a moment that really transformed the game for them. It's a risky one given how good the latter of those two has been this season, and to disrupt that midfield as well, to take off someone that influential at times. It was a risky move, but it certainly paid off, and it showed that Genesio maybe has a little bit more mettle than some Lyon fans are willing to give him at the moment. But just the interesting story, as well as Depay on this one, is obviously the other star man for Lyon this season, and that's Nabil Fekir, who is being linked with a move away from the club, possibly to Liverpool, is the strongest rumours we've heard, and I'm sure a number of Liverpool fans will want to get a take on the mercurial Frenchman. So here's your opportunity to do that. He's maybe had a slower second half of the season, Jess, but if he was to go to Liverpool, he could, in theory, out of anyone I can think of in European football, be a potential ideal Philippe Coutinho replacement.
Yeah, I think he's. There's no doubt he's got the ability, and sort of with his attacking intent, and for example, with as good as Depay's hat trick was, the first and third goals were. The third goal was made by a brilliant Traore pass. The first one was made by a really clever little run by Fekir, sort of turning his defender, kind of going around the corner and then squaring it. So with his attacking ability, his speed, obviously the fact that he's left-footed, which I think provides just a little bit extra for defenders to think about. He could certainly fit into the Liverpool team. He's he's strong. He's got that sort of little bit of not nastiness at all, but he won't be easily pushed around or anything. So I think he could fit really well into the Premier League. I think he's as good as he is, and I think he's improving, and probably this year, over the course of a full season, despite again a couple of injuries disrupting things, it's probably been his most consistent season overall. I still think maybe he needs a little bit more consistency, kind of a bit like Lyon as a whole this season. He kind of has really great periods and then periods where he goes a little bit missing. But certainly all of the raw ingredients are there. He's, we've talked about how he's thrived with under the captaincy, having been given the captaincy. And yes, I think he's improving all the time. Whereas it used to be just sort of youthful exuberance. And I mean, whenever I think of him, I still always think about his hat trick against, I think it might have been, it was either Caen or Troyes, just before he got that first really bad ligament injury. It's one of the best hat tricks I've ever seen. And he's always had the skills, but now he's added a little bit more nous of experience. I think if he decides to go, and his quotes after the match can be sort of construed either way, where he's talking in the past tense. Obviously, everything he's done with Lyon up till now has been in the past, but it did feel a little bit like he was kind of starting to suggest he wants to make a move. And even if Olas is saying, well, now he can stay because he's got Champions League football, you do wonder if it's a little bit of codology and trying to add $1 million or $2 million onto the price. If he decides to move, then I definitely think he's ready. And with Liverpool's very, very attacking game and sort of especially counter-attacking, I think he could fit in really well there.
Yeah, you've sent me back there, Jez, to that it was a hat-trick against Cole. It was a really terrific hat-trick. I remember the sort of close ball control and the excitement that we all had before that knee injury, and it's delightful to see him back, and he would wear that Liverpool shirt very well. I'll briefly sort of come across the other two contenders for the Champions League, and I want to sort of dance through this because we've got a lot to get through tonight, at least anyway. So I'm going to throw both of the teams into the hat for you, Rich. Monaco obviously got the result they needed, a good result and an excellent performance again from Moroni Lopez, who's somehow not managed to get to the Portugal team, but they're in the Champions League and have a good chance to maybe rebuild after a difficult season. But at the same time, for Marseille, it's 2 knocks in 4 days. They obviously have that relatively dismal Europa League final in the end. At least they had that positive 20 minutes, but ever since Antoine Griezmann put the Spanish side ahead, they really didn't stand the chance. And it looked like at times, especially like at half time, maybe Marseille would sneak it. Even when Alassane Player scored that goal late on for Nice, you thought maybe it still might end in a draw and Marseille would sneak through, but they just about miss out, and that is a little bit of a body blow. So let's go for both. Start with Monaco. A successful season in the end for them, and for Marseille, they would have taken this at the start of the season, but at the same time, it feels like a little bit of a disappointment in the end.
Yeah, I think Monaco's season has really sort of petered out, and it sort of a damp squib feel to it, really. Of yes, they've got second, but I don't know. There was just something lacking in that. Certainly in the last couple of months that we've seen with Monaco, that sort of flair has gone. That sort of excitement of how they play has gone, and yeah, it sort of felt a really sort of laborious end to the season for them. Absolute full credit to them for getting second. That would have been their target from the start of the season, so that's achieved. They balanced, obviously, losing some really, really big key players last summer. I don't think some of the new players have been integrated as well as they might have liked, but maybe that just takes a little bit of time. I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, due to combinations of quite a long injury list and various suspensions, is a glimpse into the future. We saw Moussa Silla. I think he got a double, against Caen the other week. Last minute winner included in that. We've seen Jordi Mbula come off the bench and he got a goal against Troyes. We've seen Amame Toure with the talk of Sidibe looking like he's going to be going in the summer. He's going to be starting at right back. We've got Julian Serrano, a youngster who's been brought in to play at left back. There's a lot of young players from that they have obviously acquired and brought through their youth system that are giving them giving Monaco fans and Ligue 1 fans a glimpse into what could be next season. I think ever since Mbula joined from Barcelona, we've all been quite eager to see just what he can offer. We saw what he offered for Barcelona's youth sides and some of the amazing goals that he scored and amazing trickery he's got. So I think we're all looking forward next season now. And I think that's what Monaco fans, have to take forward, is that they can identify what they need to change in the summer, but they've also then got these really exciting young players. They've got a lot of exciting young players as well to come back off loan. They've got Paul Nardi, a good young goalkeeper who, seeing what Subasic has been like this season, maybe he'll get a shot next season. They've got Ait Benasser to come back into midfield from his loan spell at Caen. So there's a lot of young players that I think will give Monaco some hope that we're going to see that attacking football again. And this is just another, as we've spoken about, another cog, another sort of part of the wheel in the system, if you like, of this is the next stage. We've had the successful stage that led to Ligue 1 success. We're now in this next stage that will hopefully then bring back, success at the tail end of that stage again. So I think there's excitement there, but season as a whole, yes, they got what they achieved what they set out to, but perhaps not to the level that they would have hoped to have done. To have only really nicked it in the last couple of weeks, probably is not quite where Monaco and probably Jardim himself, if he's being honest, where he is and wanted that team to be. But ultimately, you can't complain with second place. Marseille, yeah, you're quite right in what you said, is at the start of the season, if you'd have offered them fourth place and runners-up in the Europa League, they'd have absolutely snapped your hand off. I think where they were come January, comfortably in the top four, and certainly, Lyon and Monaco were far closer, Monaco especially, that second place was in their grasp. If they'd have gone out, and I've mentioned this numerous times, that they'd gone out in January and recruited in those key positions that they really need, which is enforcing and improving that defence, bringing in perhaps an extra body in midfield and bringing in a top quality striker, I've no doubt that they would have certainly got top three. Maybe they'd have even pushed Monaco more for second place. So Marseille fans have to feel happy with what they've ended up with, but I think they're right to feel as though it could have been that little bit more. I think losing to Atletico Madrid in the final of the Europa League there's no shame in that. An absolutely great team, coached by a great manager. Antoine Griezmann, he's in terrific form the last couple of years. One of the world's best forwards. There's no shame in losing that final. I think domestically, though, they perhaps, if they'd have brought in and recruited more wisely in January, I think Marseille would have got top three. And maybe second place is perhaps pushing it, but I certainly think they'd have given Monaco a closer run for their money than they've ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where if you look back from Marseille, they maybe take a step back from themselves and see how far they've come. But at the same time, when you're so close to that brass ring, it can be ever the more painful. I want to talk about another team that's managed to get European football now, Jez, and it is sort of shock, really, more than anything, because Bordeaux will be competing in the Europa League next season. They've sort of somersaulted from mid-table and even danger at the start of the season. I mean, under Gourvenec, it looked like they were possibly going to be contending at the bottom of the table more than anything. But they had that little resurgence under Poyet when he was first announced as their manager. They sort of slipped from there. But really, in the last 7 games, they've won 6 of them, which is really tremendous stuff. Yes, some people point that their wins against Lille, Dijon, who were Bordeaux's ground, which is not ideal. Toulouse, Metz are in there, but wins against the Saint-Etienne side that was in form, against the Montpellier side that obviously are really stubborn, and they put 3 past them. They only lost 1-0 to Bordeaux. It's a terrific end to the season, and credit to Gus Poyet. He's got this side into Europe where they were last season, where they didn't really pay much attention to it, but it's a tremendous feat from where they were.
Yeah, I think I'll start off with not criticism, but I do sadly think that this wasn't generally a vintage year for Ligue, and from one week to the next, any of the sort of middle of the table could have a stormer or a really bad match, and we've seen that a lot with Nice. We've seen that with Saint-Etienne. Their sort of form was split very much across 2 halves of the season. And as you said, Bordeaux as well started badly, then had a great run, went off the boil and finished brilliantly. The fact is, at the end of the season, the table doesn't lie, so they deserve to be where they are. And I think Poyet should take a lot of credit for that. I think he took a team that was very low on morale and kind of really sort of boosted them and gave them a real kick up the arse, which he's very good at doing. And really, when it looked like again it was sort of faltering, managed to I think really shake up his team in the background, and that probably helped change things enough to clinch qualification. I have to admit, I mean, this is partly because of my sort of bias because of how he was at Brighton, which is my team in England. I'm still not convinced that it will work long term with him, but what he's done this season has been fantastic, and I think he has been helped a lot by the fact that Malcolm has done a bit of a Mark Viduka and remembered that there's a transfer window coming up, and suddenly started playing the last 6 weeks or so like he did the first 6 weeks of the season. So I would be very surprised if Malcolm is still there, and rightly or wrongly, he is still the player that they're certainly not a one-man team, but he is the one that really makes them tick going forward. And if he leaves, then in order to sort of maintain what they've done this year and to do something good in Europe, I think they really have to buy wisely to sort of remain competitive, because at the start of the season it felt like he was carrying the team, and while that hasn't been the case the rest of the season, and not even the last few weeks, when he really went into a mid-season sulk, that was when the team sort of fell away again. So they need to make sure that next year they have the personnel to sort of continue fighting on 2 fronts, and hopefully to improve on what they've done this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, the mid-table has been a bit strange this season, but there was a real surge for a number of teams at the end. I'm thinking Nice and Saint-Etienne as well. Really made a sort of good fist of European football, and credit to Bordeaux for getting there. But they are, if Malcolm is to go, using that money wisely and investing it in 3, 4, 5 players that maybe build the squad a little bit better will really go a long way. On to matters at the bottom of the table, and things were confirmed and decided this weekend. And we'll start with the team that is confirmed to be going down to Ligue 2, Rich, and that's Troyes, who ended with a 3-0 defeat against Monaco. It was always a tough task for them. Obviously, they had an uphill battle whenever you saw the fixture list come out, really, that last couple of games where they've got points. In fairness, they like I say, they obviously got beat 3-0 at Lyon, but they got a point away from Montpellier, which isn't an easy thing to do, and kept them running in the last bit. And they tried against Monaco, but it was always going to be a tall ask. And in the end, they've sort of succumbed to their fate, which has sort of been their fate for the second half of the season. Because I mean, well, when you look back at things and you look at the fact that they've only won 3 games in the second half of the season, and that's to Lille, to Metz, and to Caen the other week, it always feels like that kind of form is just going to end up relegated.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit sorry for them, because I thought that actually, especially considering their run-in, I thought they actually have been playing some decent football. The results just sadly haven't reflected that. I think some of the defeats have been a little harsh. But yeah, I mean, they have played really well. I mean, it's just come down to them. It's just an absolute lack of goals. I think it's only Caen have scored fewer than Troyes this season, and it's the ultimate cliche, isn't it? If you're not going to score goals, you are, especially as a newly promoted side, you're going to struggle to stay up. And 32 goals across the season's just really not good enough. So, I mean, it's a shame. I'd like to have seen them stay up along with the other 2 promoted sides from last season, because they fought very, very hard. I mean, the fact it's come down to the final game of the season, for that to be confirmed, I think has been a real credit to how hard they've battled. And as I say, I think they've played some decent stuff at times. Sadly, they've just not been able to convert chances, and therefore have not been able to convert, losses into draws and draws into wins, which has then ultimately been their absolute downfall. So, they'll come back. They're a team that they'll bounce back ability. They're a team that do that. They do flip between the top 2 divisions fairly frequently. So they'll be back. It's not necessarily a squad that's going to be absolutely gutted. I think there's 1 or 2 players that may be snapped up. I think Samuel Grandsir is rumoured to be angling for a move away. The sort of talented youngster who's had a bit of a breakthrough this season, but they'll be back. They just need to work out, to get some consistency in this league now, because they've been up and down quite a bit now. And they need to recognise that it's going to be goals. I think each time they've been up, there's been a lack of goals. So if they are to come up and stay up, they need to rectify that.
Yeah, that was the funny thing, wasn't it? In the summer, they obviously had Grandsir, and they had a bit of a lean on Nive last season, but that's why they tried to buy some of the players that were a little bit better in Ligue. I'm thinking of trying to remember the striker they bought as well, that was one of the top scorers in Ligue 2 last season, but it never really hit the ground running. Unfortunately, Nian, he scored 8, which isn't too bad, but they've all been sporadic kind of goals. They've been maybe a double in a game and a double here, and that's not quite as effective as they really need. The goals weren't really spread out enough, and eventually that's got them down. But at the same time, you look at teams like Caen, who scored 27 goals this season, which is frankly embarrassing. I would be really disappointed if I was one of their fans. I wouldn't want to watch them all season, at least anyway. But the team that they obviously managed to survive just with getting a point at Paris Saint-Germain, but the ones that are affected by that result, even though they did win, is Toulouse, who do go into that relegation playoff, and it looks like it will be Ajaccio, but we won't be absolutely certain really until the game really happens on Wednesday, and whether that Toulouse could actually turn up because of the fiery Corsicans, shall we say. The Islanders maybe showing their passion a little bit too much in the last couple of weeks yet again. But on to them. Again, they're in the same boat as Troyes, really. The last half of the season has only seen 3 victories for them, and that's clearly not enough, and especially with the body blows that they got, especially against Lille, when they were ahead against Rennes as well, where they were up 1-0, and they were 2-1 up against Lille, and they let that slip. That was the real hefty one, and then obviously the pretty hefty defeat to Bordeaux, but that was all but over. The 2 goals really complementing Le Violet rather than the Les Jourdains performance. But they got a good result at the weekend. They feel like a side that should be too strong for Ajaccio or even Le Havre, depending on who it ends up being, depending on what the authorities decide to choose on that one. But at the same time, you really don't want to go through a playoff because we've only seen one in France so far, and we all thought Lorient had enough for Troyes, and it turned out to be a different case. So Toulouse have a lot of preparing for Wednesday, and they'll need to get their focus right back on track.
Yeah, I think that I said it last week that I thought Troyes were probably down, and then I thought that Toulouse and Caen, frankly, both deserved to go down. Toulouse, both as a club and in terms of their playing personnel, really should not be anywhere near where they are, and shouldn't be relying sort of 2 of the last 3 years on last minute or last match escapes. Similarly, I'm surprised that more eyebrows haven't been raised about the fact that Caen have been saved 2 years in a row with draws against PSG. Which, well, anyway, don't want to say anything that would get anyone in trouble.
Well, Max Gradel pointed it out.
Yeah.
He came out and said that he was very disappointed. That I think it was his words. Look at that front three. Who are they? Kind of thing. And
yeah, I mean, in
PSG's
defence, I don't think they've won for 5 matches now, so it's not a defence. I think it's disgraceful.
The thing I would mention, though, is that on these kind of things, if you're relying on results on another game, that's your own fault, and that's your own bed that you have to lie in on these kind of things. I'm always sick and tired of I can remember, I think it was a season where Hull City wanted to stay up, and Man United had already won the league, and they played about 8 or 9 kids, and it didn't really matter. I think United won anyway, but at the same time, it's relying on yourself. If you've not got the points ready already, that's your own fault, really, going into the same. Continue, Jess.
I totally agree, and I'm not shedding tears for Toulouse. It's more, I think Caen have been a bit lucky, but yeah, I think Toulouse shouldn't be down there. Got a decent win at the weekend. You know, home to Guingamp was always not the worst match that you want if you need 3 points to secure, well, not safety, but you know, a chance of staying up. If to be completely honest, if it had been against Le Havre, or if it still proves to be against Le Havre, I would be cheering on Le Havre. You know, for such a long time now, they've been such a brilliant sort of incubator of excellent young French players, and I always feel a bit sorry that, you know, whereas the whole league and a lot of Ligue 1 sort of selling clubs, Le Havre sort of have to sell their players so early that they don't even get the chance to show what they can do in Ligue 1, or they haven't for a while anyway. So I think it would be a really nice addition to Ligue 1. If it does turn out to be Ajaccio, then I think probably practically the whole country will be supporting Toulouse, whatever they think of them. I don't think there's many people who think that Ajaccio have acted well.
I think the LFP are meeting tomorrow. I think,
yeah, they are. Yeah,
to confirm what's happened. I think it was off the back of there's quite a lengthy Twitter thread from the Le Havre Twitter account of the various misdemeanors that went on from obviously what happened on the Friday when the game was supposed to take place, with the coach being attacked, and I think it was a smoke bomb thrown at the coach that exploded under the coach and broke a hose or something under the coach, which meant the coach couldn't move, and then the players didn't want to get off it because it wasn't safe. And
I think they've even released film taken from in the coach, and it's pretty scary to see.
Yeah, I wouldn't be getting off that coach.
And I think they also took the coach back to Normandy and then went all the way back down again, which obviously is not ideal preparation at all. Then during the match, I think 2 pitch invasions. Ajaccio's coach was sent off, but came back on to give a pep talk or whatever just before the penalty shootout. There was a hell of a lot going on. Mateta
there's also been accusations of some racist chanting, and I think, did I also see that the Le Havre vice president was attacked? Not in anything too severe, but there was a scuffle anyway involving the Le Havre vice president as well. So if you read the tweets that Le Havre put out, there's about 8 or 9, and it's all just these misdemeanors that mean I can't quite see how Ajaccio can be given this tie, considering the sort of arguments that have gone against them, and some of them are so obvious and so clear. You know, it's been on film and we all see it. I don't quite know how it
it sets a dangerous precedent to do nothing. I think that if it had just been the fans, then there might be an argument for saying, well, why should the players or the staff or whatever be punished because of the fans? But the fact is that everyone in the club seems kind of guilty in one way or another. I think it's hard to ignore. But, I say it sets a bad precedent. I saw some Ajaccio fans saying, citing previous examples and giving, for example, the Lille earlier this season and saying, well, nothing much happened to them. They have a point. I don't understand how Lille are still allowed to have fans in the ground. I think it's ridiculous. And, when people talk about Lille might be in trouble with the DNCG, I think they're a big enough club that they also seem to benefit from a few strange cases of leniency, and this seems to be another one. And I can understand why Ajaccio are pointing to it, but I think they will be in trouble. I think it's very difficult not to.
Well, you look at what it finally took for the LFP to take action against Bastia. They were
exactly. Yeah.
They were let off the hook countless times with just a little, not a stadium closure, partial stadium closures, a little fine here, a little fine there. It took for Bastia fans to enter the field of play and attack Lyon players for the LFP to finally. I mean, even then, I think Bastia got off incredibly lightly considering what happened.
I think Bastia.
It was just. I think they just got the game. Did they get? They weren't allowed to play at home for the rest of the season, I don't think, and the game was awarded, I think, 3-0 to Lyon. But that was pretty much it, as far as I recall. So a lot of Corsican team. I mentioned it at the time. I don't mind seeing, a bit of fire and a bit of a sort of quite a wary atmosphere. I don't mind that, but you obviously can't cross the line as Ajaccio did the other day.
I think that's the thing. I think the authorities are sort of torn because having teams from Corsica is kind of a nice addition to the league and with all the character that comes with it. And obviously politically, it's never the sort of calmest situation. They probably don't want to be open to any accusations of some kind of political bias or whatever, getting rid of them. But at the same time, there has to be some kind of controls. And I think Bastia, there was such a long list of incidents, but possibly each one wasn't bad enough on its own to look at serious bans until that last one in the Lyon match. This one, just all of them together, just it's beyond the pale. And I've seen I don't know if I think it's a PSG supporters group. I don't think it's the club itself calling for all Corsican clubs to be banned. I think that's ridiculous. I think Philippe Auclair has called for really serious punishments as well. I'm not sure they need to be as draconian as he's saying, which is kind of demotion by a couple of leagues, but definitely something has to be done. And at the very least, I can't believe the match went ahead anyway, but at the very least, I think this match has to be given to Le Havre.
Yeah, and that's possibly where they might be leading, but we'll keep our eyes on it. And to be fair, they need to make a decision quick. I feel sorry for Toulouse. It's not ideal for their preparation. I doubt they'll be particularly pleased if they're.
Well, I think Ajaccio then had the temerity to make a request to delay the game, because obviously the game was put back to Sunday and then went to penalties, and they said, "Oh well, we're a little bit tired. Can we move the game back on Wednesday?" Which I thought was perhaps just taking the mick a little bit too far.
Yeah, there's some time where the horse has bolted, hasn't it? And they're crying foul straight after that. It's very, very strange. On to.
I mean, it's not ideal for Toulouse, but I think it's better for Toulouse than probably either of the teams that they'll face. Whichever team they face, I don't feel sorry for Ajaccio if it turns out to be them, but I'd rather be in Toulouse's position than either of them.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Just. On to things off the field, really, in Ligue 1, because matters on the field have concluded, but that has made some movements around Ligue 1, and a couple of interesting ones, really. We'll talk about the ones in the league at the moment, such as we sort of briefly talked about Tuchel last week, so I'll leave them out of this one. But potential replacements for Ranieri and Garand, who's left Caen, and Lucien Favre, who looks like he's going to go to Dortmund, and he's confirmed to have left Nice. But the interesting one that's developed this evening, really, from partially a Ligue 1 perspective, is the one at Arsenal. actually, which looks like Unai Emery will be the new coach for that club come this summer. I hope in the next couple of days that Spaniard could be confirmed as well. But it's an interesting move, Rich. They look like they were very close to going for Mikel Arteta, but they've stuck with the former Paris Saint-Germain man now. Managed to win 5 trophies in his time with the Parisians. Obviously, the 2 domestic cups last season and a domestic treble this season. Some people will point to the failures in the Champions League and also some of the unrest in the dressing room. But what kind of man are Arsenal getting?
I think Arsenal fans have to look at what happened with PSG as a bit of an anomaly. I think for them to get an understanding of what he's really like, they probably have to go back to his time with Sevilla. I think you can't really compare him managing PSG with him managing Arsenal. It's a completely different setup. It's a completely different set of players, a whole different level of ego involved in at Arsenal. And ultimately, whether Arsenal fans like it or not, PSG are pitching themselves at a much higher level. They brought in Emery to try and bring them Champions League success. It was proven sort of over these 2 seasons that at the minute he's not a Champions League manager, but we know obviously he is a Europa League manager and a very successful Europa League manager. And unfortunately for Arsenal fans at the minute, they're a Europa League team. So you can list off all Allegri, you can list off Simeone, Luis Enrique. You can list off all these amazing people, amazing coaches. But in all honesty, are they likely to come to Arsenal in Arsenal's current state? You've just had 22 years of Wenger. You saw how that ended. The sort of vitriol that some of the fans were giving Wenger after the success that he'd had, and how that's ended. It's not something that a top class manager is going to be overly attracted to. So I actually I'm hoping that Arsenal, if Emery is the coach that's given the go ahead, I'm hoping that they'll give him time, because I do think he could be a good fit here. I think he was put in a very difficult position at PSG. You could argue that he should have known that before he took the job, but I'd imagine that the check that was put under his nose by PSG was probably quite persuasive. But I just think he is a good coach. What he got out of that Sevilla side in Europe is, I think it's unprecedented. I don't think the team has won 3 consecutive or 3. Was it all 3 consecutive? I can't remember or not, but they were certainly very close if they weren't. I think he needs to be given time. If Arsenal are not a team that are going to be going out and spending hundreds and hundreds of millions, which PSG evidently can do. So again, that's going to be something that's going to put off some of the top tier managers. They're not going to be able to necessarily bring in the players that they want to bring in. So I think, yes, I've seen a lot of Arsenal fans saying, what an underwhelming appointment. I get that, but I think there has to be an element of realism, I think, here with Arsenal and where they're currently at. They're not a top 4 team. It's going to take a good manager, but it's going to take a lot of investment, bringing in some really good players, because that is not a top 4 squad at the minute. So I think, as they did with Wenger, as all good successful teams seem to do, they have to give the manager time. So yes, he's perhaps an underwhelming name compared to some of the big names that they were linked to, but I actually think he could turn out to be a pretty good fit at Arsenal. So fingers crossed they give him time. But I do feel for him, because I tweeted earlier, it feels a little bit for him. It's out of the frying pan and into the fire, because he's left PSG and all the issues that were there to a club where there's a very vocal, very visible fan base that are not afraid to speak their mind, whether it's the right thing or not. And I just feel that he's not going to be given that time. But if he is, I think he could turn out to be a pretty successful appointment.
It's definitely an interesting appointment. I mean, some people will point and laugh and say he's at least a Europa League specialist, which will help Arsenal maybe go a couple of stages further than they did last season. But at least at the same time, that's a good opportunity to get back into the Champions League. It showed it for Manchester United a few seasons ago that it was worth the shot, and it gets you back in there and getting someone that can get that out of them. But I suppose the worries portraying really from the fact that. Just Paris Saint-Germain, really, he wasn't given control of the signings. And some people will also point to the fact that to win the domestic league competition, they had to have their opponents sell, 150 million pounds worth of talent, and they had to increase that by about 300 million talent going the other way. But at the same time, he pulled out some decent performances. Some of the tactical things might be questioned and bits like that. But at the same time, he's learned a bit of English. Maybe he's coming across better. There was an issue with his French while he was at Paris Saint-Germain, and sometimes that maybe if cost him. He's very much into his film study, so it's an interesting appointment, and one that, if given some time to relax in it and get to know the players and improve his English, might prove out to be a fruitful one.
I think it's a potentially excellent appointment. There's quite a lot of sort of delusion going on certainly on Twitter from Arsenal fans, and as Rich said, people saying things like, why aren't we going for Jardim, why aren't we going for Nagelsmann, why don't you add, why aren't we going for Guardiola while you're at it? The fact is that the top coaches may not necessarily want to go to Arsenal at the moment. It's not the most attractive role in football. It wouldn't be anyway, but when you look at the two very obvious cases of a manager taking over after a really long-serving, successful manager, both at United. I mean, there's probably other examples, but I'm just thinking of Ferguson and Busby. Afterwards, whoever replaced them were on a hiding to nothing. So I can understand why the very top managers don't want to go there. I can understand why the top young managers who are sort of just building their reputation don't want to take the risk of going there. And frankly, I think Emery is, I was going to say as good as they can get, but I think that's actually quite insulting to him. He's a very good manager, and as Rich said, the 2 years at PSG can almost be seen as an anomaly, because I don't think we saw the best of him, because I don't think we were allowed to. I think everything was taken out of his hands, and my issue is less the control over the transfers and more just day-to-day running or week-to-week picking of the teams. I don't think he had a free hand at all. And as Rich said, he probably knew that taking the job. Maybe that's one of his faults, that he should have stood up for himself more, or stood up to the players or to El Khalifi more. But I don't think he'll have that same issue at Arsenal. Maybe he won't have a complete say in transfers, but PSG were going for Champions League, and he didn't have a say, and the transfers they made completely hamstrung him in terms of what he was trying to achieve there. At Arsenal, the ambitions have to be a bit lower than that, and frankly, if he can maintain the position they're in and just improve it slightly, and it doesn't take a huge improvement to get into Champions League qualification again, then I think he has to be deemed a success, and I think he's very capable of that. One of the big criticisms of Wenger was that he wasn't tactically astute. One of the main things that everyone says is Emery's strong point, even if, again, he wasn't allowed to show it so much at PSG, is that he is a good tactician. I really think it could be a very good move, and I put it in a tweet earlier. At PSG, they had owners who knew nothing about football but kept butting in. At Arsenal, they've got owners who know nothing about football and couldn't care less, which I can understand why Arsenal hate that, because as long as the money's rolling in, they're not dealing with the proper issues. But on the other side, that could work to Emery's advantage, because he won't have people above him telling him what to do. And if he can form a good relationship with, I can never pronounce his name, but Sven Mislintat.
Yeah.
I really think that he could. He's fallen slightly below the reputation that he had a couple of years ago and has a lot to prove. Arsenal have fallen slightly down from where they were a couple of years ago and have got a lot to prove. I really think it could be a partnership that works, or a sort of marriage that works very well together.
Yeah, it's going to be certainly an interesting one, really seeing how that develops with both Emery trying to bounce back from the disappointment in the end, I suppose, at Paris Saint-Germain, but expectations are so exceedingly high, and maybe trying to restore them at a club like Arsenal that does have such a grand tradition. We'll talk about the sort of managerial merry-go-round next week. We've got a longer show next week, sort of a review of the entire season, so do join us for that. I'll tip that at the end of the show, but we'll move on because we do have more pressing news, at least anyway, for this week, and that is the Les Bleus squad that's going to the World Cup in this summer in Russia. It has been announced by Didier Deschamps, and there's some interesting choices in there. It was always going to be a few players that would miss out and be a bit disappointed. Payet is one of those. He obviously might be more through injury. You look at, there's a lot of players in the forward line, unsurprisingly, but the one I wanted to talk about first of all, really, Rich, and the surprise one for most is the omission of Adrien Rabiot and the inclusion of Steven Nzonzi. Now, Didier Deschamps says that Nzonzi is much better cover for N'Golo Kante. Obviously, is a more defensive-minded player, but Rabiot has been a sort of present, at least in the squad-wise, for Les Bleus for a while. But at the same time, he did admit that sometimes he performs completely differently from the France squad, and that's eventually sort of knocked him out. Do you think that was the right decision going forward, especially with the midfield that they do have going? They have Tolisso, Conte, Pogba and Matuidi. And was Nzonzi the right pick over Rabiot?
Well, first of all, I think the omission of Rabiot is the correct call. I think his attitude, I think certainly since the turn of the year, has stunk, really. He's clearly not playing at his best, whether that's through his choice or not. I don't know, but certainly the noises that seem to be coming out from himself, which is perhaps the most startling thing, is it seems to be he's almost choosing not to play at his best. You know, he's being put in this number 6 role, which he has been very vocal that he doesn't like, and that's not how it works, especially when you're a young, still pretty unproven player. I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. You play where your coach tells you. And, you know, certainly at international level, you bow down to the fact that Didier Deschamps knows what he's talking about. So I just think it's his attitude and how that then has crept into his performances that's cost him. Now, what I hope is that, you know, Tuchel coming into PSG at club level and missing out on a World Cup spot, I hope that is the necessary kick that he needs to realise, actually, you know what, I can't behave like this on and off the pitch. I need to book my ideas up because on my day, I'm a very good player. And he is. You know, we've seen it in numerous games, especially some Champions League games. He is a top quality player, but there's just something at an attitude level which doesn't quite sit with the sort of the harmonious squad that Deschamps has sort of proclaimed that is his key thing. Hence, you know, several other higher profile omissions. So that has certainly played a more than significant part in the reason that he's not been picked. I think Nzonzi probably, by and large, probably deserves it. I think Kondogbia maybe can count himself a little bit unlucky. It's, you know, he's had a very good season in Spain as well. But Nzonzi has been called into the last couple of squads. When he's been called upon then to play, he's looked decent. And as Deschamps pointed out, he is much more suitable cover should something happen to N'Golo Kante. So I don't have too many issues, if I'm perfectly honest with that. I think Deschamps overall has probably made the right call there.
The other interesting one, really, Jez, is that they maybe have taken a little bit of a risk at left back. They've brought in Benjamin Mendy, who's missed most of the season, obviously. He was always going to be in the squad if he was fit. But at the same time, the cover behind him is a little bit risky. Obviously, the player looks like Lucas Hernandez will probably be the first choice left back should things go their way, unless they decide something like Drubio Sidibe playing on the right-hand side. They also obviously left out Mathieu Debuchy, that many had sort of campaigned for with his sort of end of the season. With defence being one of those problem areas, you maybe say, especially with Koscielny dropping out, they've gone for Adil Rami as his replacement, and I assume they'll probably use Pavard and Hernandez again as cover centre back if they need to, as well as Kim Pembe being in the squad. But interesting choices at the back line, and especially that trust in Lucas Hernandez to be cover for Benjamin Mendy should they need it.
Yeah, I mean, Rami I won't dwell on, but I still think it's an atrocious decision. I simply don't think he's a very good defender, and it made me laugh in the Europa League final after he was one of the players caught out for Atletico's second goal, and he was sort of walking around punching his chest and pumping everyone up. Instead of do that, why don't you concentrate on doing your job properly? But anyway, I'm not keen on that appointment. In terms of the fullbacks, I just think that there isn't any particularly ideal situation or ideal pick because the options aren't great. Whoever was picked, frankly, in the two positions, the two sort of first team and backup in both positions, both sides of the pitch. There's strong arguments to be made against every pick, and not particularly strong arguments to be made in favour of anyone else. So I think you have to take the risk of Mendy because I think at the moment he's at his best anyway, or at his full fitness. He's by so far the best left back that France have got, that I think it has to be done as a calculated risk. And Hernandez, at least recently, he has been playing a lot. He has been playing at a high level. He's got that bit of versatility that if need be, he could play in the centre, whereas Digne has not been playing a lot and is only a left back. Should Deschamps have qualms about playing Hernandez and something happens to Mendy, Sidibe is I was going to say equally good at left back as at right back. I don't mean that as a compliment, but he can play at left back. Umtiti, remember at the start of his career, Lyon played well at left back. It's been a while since he's done it, but he is capable. And then at right back, a similar kind of thing. I think it would have been nice to see Debuchy there, but to be fair to Pavard, when he's been given the chance, he's had an excellent season for Stuttgart, and when he's had the chance for France, he's taken it, which, as Rich said earlier on, in terms of Rabiot, he hasn't. I know it's a completely different position, but Deschamps judges it not just on club performances, but also attitude and performances when they play for France. And on the basis of that, Pavard absolutely deserves to go, I think. And again, you've got that extra facet that he can also play at centre back. So should something happen to Varane, and for whatever reason Deschamps sees sense and doesn't want to risk Rami, then Pavard could play there instead. So it's not ideal, but hopefully there's enough talent and versatility there that we can sort of muddle through.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit awkward for me, at least, that maybe someone like Amavi wasn't at least considered as someone potentially to play at left back, but they get to leave out so much talent. I mean, Payet obviously may be injured, but Lacazette, Martial, Rabiot, even though he's not been in form, he's still a great player to leave out and have the option to do that. Kingsley Coman, you have to envy it, especially with us. All right, but at least us English contingent to be slightly less jealous when our team sheet comes out. It's not quite as star-laden as the French has even left out, unfortunately. Even the Spanish, looking at this earlier, it's envy of the world, really. That's all that we have time for this week. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do remember there's no more preview shows this season, but we will have one final main show next week. That'll be starting at 8 p.m. live, and it should be a slightly longer show as we look back at every single Ligue 1 team and maybe a couple of Ligue 2 teams that will be joining us next season. But until then, it'll be the same time or same place at least next week. A bientôt and goodbye.